there. Welcome to India Now. I'm Mark Fennell. Coming up on the program, changing the caste system, which continues to have such a huge influence on Indian life. And I talk to Imran Khan, the deposed Prime Minister of Pakistan.
There's a consensus in the country that even a poor democratic government is better than a military government.
And joining me on the panel is peace activist Apurva Mahire. Welcome to the show.
Jebim, kia ora.
And Neha Madok, Director at racial justice organisation Democracy in Colour. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me.
The pleasure is entirely mine. Let's start with the news. Avani Dias is the ABC's South Asia correspondent and joins me now from Delhi. Avani, this week Pakistan's economic woes have been in the spotlight, of course, but the situation is so dire now that one minister has actually pleaded with people to drink less tea. Really?
That's right, Mark. It's a crazy situation, right? These basic things like tea, food, fuel, these basic services that people probably never had to think about really are now becoming these luxury goods in different parts of South Asia. You and I have spoken a lot about the situation unfolding in Sri Lanka. That's now turned into a humanitarian emergency, and now Pakistan is going in that direction as well. It's only got about $10 billion left in foreign reserves, and economists say that will only last about 45 days for imports, and tea is a really expensive import for Pakistani people. So the government has made this extraordinary move. It's also cut down the working week. In Pakistan, people work 6 days a week. Now they're being told to work for 5 days so they can cut down on fuel and other energy consumption. And this week, Pakistan is negotiating with the International Monetary Fund, trying to get a $6 billion bailout in order to keep things going again.
Avani, the current PM, Shehbaz Sharif, says he is paying the price for the mismanagement of his predecessor. Of course, his predecessor, Imran Khan, says otherwise. Here's a spicy question. Who's right?
It's a really interesting question, Mark, and it really depends who you speak to. On one side, Imran Khan says, well, look, your cost of living has gone up under this new government. Fuel prices are rising. Things are really dire economically, and that's because I'm no longer the leader. But if you speak to the new government, Shehbaz Sharif, as well as a few experts on the ground, then they're saying, well, this economic situation is a result of government mismanagement by Imran Khan and his party. And they're saying, well, we needed to make these tough decisions, which will affect cost of living for Pakistani people, because we need a bailout from the IMF. We need to improve the economy, and that in the long term will make things better. But Imran Khan is not going to go down without a fight. He's such a key figure in Pakistan who's going to keep holding these rallies and doing what he can to try and get fresh elections and get back that leadership, Mark.
Neha, you specialise in political campaigning and driving change. What do you make of Imran Khan's movement?
Look, I think the most important thing to think about here is the fact that people feel like the person that they elected into a leadership position has been ousted. And then I think as well there's the question around American influence. How much was America involved in Imran Khan's ousting? And I think the fact that Imran is calling for an election immediately makes it very easy for him to put himself as the person of the people. Right now, he's looking like a grassroots leader.
For you, is this a situation where they need to deal with the economic circumstances first, or should they deal with the political instability first? What's the most important part of that equation?
Well, I would probably say they both go hand in hand. There wouldn't be so much unhappiness if the economic situation was better, and vice versa. So, like Neha mentioned, that the person that the people have elected has been ousted. There might be external influences. So the current government really needs to step up and start making some policies that would really ease those, fuel prices and the price of tea. If that's such a basic necessity for all us Indian subcontinents. So so the policies definitely need to come first as well.
All right, Avani. We are, of course, going to be speaking with Imran Khan later in the program, but for now, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Mark.
India's 3,000-year-old caste system was officially outlawed in 1950, but in truth, it's still very much alive in modern India, and it even affects the diaspora.
I was brought up in a very small family from the Christian background. My great-great-grandfather converted to Christianity, probably to move away from the caste system. Caste was not such a thing that we talked about. Later on, only when I started working and I traced back my identity, did I realize that, you know, I was from the Dalit community. Caste is a system that is very cleverly devised to divide people based on the work that they do. The first caste is the Brahmin caste, who are the temple priests. Then we have the second caste, who are the Kshatriya, who are the people who are the warriors, who protect the communities. Then we have the Vaishya caste, who are the businessmen or the traders. And then we have the Shudra, who like the smaller works like artisans. And below this caste is what is known as formerly the untouchables. Now we've taken on the name of Dalits. So there's a lot of discrimination between these four categories and the Dalits. We clean the toilets, we keep the streets clean, and it's absurd that they say that we are pollutant because we are actually the ones who are keeping the cities clean or cleaning the toilets or doing the work that nobody else would do. And this system is sanctioned definitely by the Hindu religion. It still exists because it's become such a cultural practice today.
A Dalit leader hacked to death.
Shock and anger in India after a 19-year-old gang raped and left for dead by her attackers.
The 25-year-old Dalit man was killed, allegedly by his upper caste in-laws.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is a Dalit social activist, lawyer, advocate, and the messiah for Dalit communities. He has given the slogan, educate, agitate, where we have to educate ourselves. We have to come together and then we have to agitate. He's the person who gave us hope. Our organization, the National Campaign on Dalit Human Rights, is a rights-based organization, and we work on policy and advocacy. There are a lot of things that need to be changed. Definitely there are laws in this country. There are very good laws. But what has happened is the people who are implementing this law continue to be from a dominant caste who don't think that it is their priority. It's also a mindset problem. When you talk to young people in the country today, they'll say, oh no, you know, caste is a matter of, you know, the past. We don't believe in caste. My family doesn't believe in caste. But everything from who you choose your partner to be, from marriage to where you're working, to who your friends are, all is based on caste, and we must not forget that.
Apurva, this is very much your story. You were born into the Dalit community, and I'm wondering, when you talk to people in the diaspora, is there an acknowledgement that it still exists?
No. So what I would probably call myself as is being born into the oppressed caste. And when I talk to people from even my age group, they say caste doesn't exist. And that's probably because they've never had to face the discrimination. So if you're not part of the system, when the system is oppressing you, you are a beneficiary of the system, and hence you would never really acknowledge its existence. And like Bina mentioned in her video, people who are following the caste system, they don't even realize sometimes that they're doing it. But everything they do, like she said, choosing your life partner or the people you're friends with or people you hang out with, they are probably going to be from the same caste as you. The statistic says 94% of Indians marry within their caste, and that's not a coincidence. That's a very, that's an engineering of society and how it works. And so when I bring up the concept of caste, it's definitely a lot of denial.
Yeah, right.
And because they haven't experienced the system. Indians also bring the caste system with them from India to wherever they travel. So if they're moving overseas, the diaspora, of course, brings their religion and the caste system with them overseas as well.
Neha, we have sort of dominant castes and we have oppressed castes. Is it the responsibility of people within sort of dominant castes to kind of start solving this problem?
Absolutely. I think people from dominant castes need to be thinking exactly like we saw in the package, educate, agitate, organise. So educate yourself, learn about what it is that means that caste either isn't in your life as something that you think about, or the benefits that you've had from your own caste, being part of the dominant caste. And then agitate, so talking to people in your community about it, asking why. Why do you want to know someone's last name? Why do you need to know this question about caste? What is it that is driving you to ask these questions? Remember, when you have also experienced inequality, whether that be racism in Australia or whether it be the British Raj and the impacts that has had in your family. And then finally, organise. So what is it that the Dalit community is asking us to do? Are they asking us to show up to a rally? Are they asking us to donate? Finding those moments of solidarity and making sure you're showing up and doing what's asked.
Apurva, is it more about dismantling the entirety of the system for you?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. So the anti-caste movement or the annihilation of caste movement is about dismantling the entire system because it's such a flawed concept. So imagine an apartment building where the top layer is the penthouse, the second and the third layers are the sort of the middle levels, and the last layer, which is the Shudras or the Ati Shudras that Beena mentioned in her video, is the basement. Now, there's no elevators, there's no stairs, so you can't go up or down. You're born into this particular caste, you will die within this particular caste. And all your life decisions, who you marry, who you're friends with, will all be within this particular caste. Now, 3% of India's population falls within the Brahmin caste, but they own about 50 to 60% of the wealth of this particular apartment building analogy that I'm giving. So they're also overrepresented in the judiciary, in other parts of most industries. So for me personally, following Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's example is annihilating the entire system, which is just destroying it from its very root.
The current president of India was born into the Dalit community. Does that not suggest there is some mobility there, or is it a bit of a smokescreen?
Well, he's still called as a Dalit president. Doesn't that tell you something about the mobility of the situation? It's almost like saying Obama was a black president, so racism is over. But that's not really how it works, because even the president actually got discriminated against when he tried to enter a temple. He wasn't allowed to do that. So you really cannot equate one with the other, of having a station in life and then being able to shake off your caste category or caste background.
Decades after Indian independence, same-sex relations remained criminalised in India under a British law, and that's despite notions of gender and sexual fluidity having ancient roots in the country.
Hello, I'm Pavan Luthra, and today I want to tell you about gender fluidity and Hindu mythology.
Indian mythology says that the body, they're talking about the male body, the female body, but they always refer to a third body, which is not fitting in the binary of male and female.
Such notions of gender fluidity are common in many ancient stories. Shiva joins with his wife Parvati to form Ardhanari Ishvara, who was both man and woman. Vishnu takes the form of Mohini, and in many temples across India, Krishna is wearing women's clothes. These are just a few examples.
Nobody has a problem with that. They say God takes any form. One of the forms is female. I say that the queer metaphor is acceptable. Now it becomes significant because you don't find this in the Islamic traditions. You don't find this in the Christian traditions. When the British come in, they find all this very strange. They found Indians very strange, not just the British, but even the Portuguese before them. They've never seen so much of color, they've never seen so much of fragrances and smells, and it's the Orientalist scary, it's very scary. They don't see this, and it's very feminine for them. And if it's feminine, it's sinister.
In 1861, Section 377 of the British Colonial Penal Code was introduced in India. It criminalized sexual acts that were considered against the order of nature. Part of the reason it was introduced was due to a link between Hijuras and rebels fighting the British.
Sexuality, gender, trans, queer was linked to pleasure, was linked to hedonism, was linked to threat to the British Empire.
After Indian independence, the law continued to stand for more than 70 years.
Even today, we are facing the repercussions. India reacted by becoming hyper-masculine, by denying its feminine side, denying its sensuality. So who gets affected the most? The marginalized queer communities gets affected the most.
खबरें विस्तार से सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने बड़ी खबर सीधे सुप्रीम कोर्ट.
But in 2018, the Supreme Court ruled Section 377, when applied to consensual sex between adults, was unconstitutional. And outside of the law, modern understanding of sexuality and gender are still seen through a mythological lens.
Indians are familiar with the trans word, mostly male to female. The gender side is more understood than the sexuality side, which is the reverse of what happens in Europe and America, where they understood sexuality, they did not understand gender. Right now, being gay is part of a public discourse. There are conversations happening on social media. So people are sort of gradually inching towards it and understanding it and trying to figure it out. But there's never a religious backlash. In culture, it's very organic. And the thing in India is it's very personal. It's not institutional.
I suppose it goes without saying, Neha, that there's real complexity when you see this play out in different communities around India.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about it, India is a very collectivist society. It's all about family, marriage, your family's reputation are all so important. And it's not very common to rock the boat and to be this individual, and you don't really come out and say, I'm gay and I'm going to be really proud of it. I mean, that is a thing that people are doing now over time, but that's not necessarily something that comes to people naturally, culturally. And so you've got this Victorian era law and these British ideas that were brought over for hundreds of years that have influenced society. And then you've got that clashing with these old ideas as well of gender and sexuality as well. And so what ends up happening is people have a base level understanding of gender and sexuality, but they also have this British morality that's been brought in. And that causes a lot of tension and confusion.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was thinking about what you were saying earlier. We were having this conversation about caste and something that you're, for better or worse, kind of born with and you carry through life. Do you see intersectionality between what's going on in the broader LGBTQI movement across India and the caste system?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the intersectionality comes within, so for example, the Dalit queer community has a sort of a twofold burden because they are, of course, marginalized based on their sexuality, but they're also marginalized based on their caste. So it's a sort of a double whammy for them.
Neha, obviously we're seeing conversations around marriage equality, same-sex marriage. Does that have an impact on the culture? Is it changing things?
Absolutely. I think so much of Indian culture, so much of subcontinental culture is built around marriage. People, their entire lives are built around who they're going to get married to, how they're going to get married. When you have a child in the family who comes out and says that they're queer, one worry that a lot of people might have is that, maybe you can't get married, maybe you can't have children, because currently the laws in India do not allow for this. So there are activists, there are couples who have petitioned the courts, and some people have been able to get recognition and others haven't. But because there are limited de facto rights, limited rights around adoption and so forth, people end up being strangers in law with their partner. And then that has the obvious repercussions of cohabitation, inheritance, medical access to your partner when they're in hospital. It reverberates throughout the community.
You worked on the marriage equality campaign here in Australia. Do you have hope for things changing in India?
I do. I actually think that the marriage equality campaign, it created this really great opportunity for people of colour in particular to have these conversations in the community. While the survey was harmful in many ways, it did force people in particularly migrant communities to actually go back and have conversations with their family, their parents, their uncles, their aunties, and say, I really want you to vote yes, because this affects me or this affects my friends in this way.
Imran Khan led Pakistan's cricket team to World Cup glory in 1992.
This could be victory, it is. Pakistan win the World Cup. A magnificent performance.
But in the 30 years since, he's gone on to become a philanthropist, setting up a cancer hospital in Lahore, and a political activist, establishing his own party, the PTI, or Movement for Justice. He became Pakistan's 22nd Prime Minister in 2018, pledging to fight corruption and revive the country's struggling economy. He's ushered in a new foreign policy too, moving away from the US and closer to Russia and China. But Pakistan's tense relationship with India did not improve on his watch. His tenure came to a dramatic end in April this year after he was overthrown in a no-confidence vote. He's accused the United States of a conspiracy to remove him from power, a claim the US State Department denies. Khan has taken to the streets to demand another election and, as we heard from Avani earlier, continues to lead rallies of his supporters. I spoke with Imran Khan from Islamabad. Imran Khan, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Mark.
Right now, Pakistan is in the midst of an economic crisis. There's huge increases in the cost of living, there's inflation, power costs, currency problems. That's a lot of change, a lot of disruption. Do you think the current government is equipped to handle this crisis?
Well, you know, Mark, knowing the aftermath of the coronavirus, it disrupted all supplies, and there was this commodity super cycle. Prices went up, inflation went up all over the world. So my government had very delicately balanced all this, and we managed to keep the prices down, and the sentiment was good because our industrial growth and our agricultural growth was going very well. So when this regime change took place, the market lost confidence. So what we are watching right now is a meltdown. Our currency has lost almost 10% of its value. Stock exchange has crashed. Prices have gone through the roof. Inflation is now about 30%. So the country is facing challenges right now.
You've led several protests over the past few weeks. What exactly are you trying to achieve? Are you not concerned that the protests will add to a sense of chaos?
Well, the chaos was when, Mark, this what we call the US-backed regime change took place in Pakistan. And so my government was replaced by a government, 60% of the cabinet is on bail. These two families have been ruling Pakistan for 30 years. So my government was the first time we replaced this two-party system and we came into power. Now, the parties that were fighting, contesting against each other, both have joined hands and are in government. But they're facing massive corruption cases. And so what has happened is that these people have come into power, rather than having a roadmap to fix the economy, all they're doing is trying to get rid of their corruption cases of billions of rupees. So they are completely incapable of handling it. All we want is, we just want elections. We want free and fair elections, so that let the people of Pakistan decide who should run the country, rather than a US-backed regime change.
You have repeatedly claimed the US backed your removal from office. What evidence do you have of that?
Well, yes. On 7th of March, the US Under-Secretary of State, Donald Lu, he meets our ambassador in Washington and actually threatens him that unless I, Imran Khan, is removed through a vote of no confidence, there'll be consequences for Pakistan. And if I'm removed, then all will be forgiven. Now, this is this American official threatening our ambassador. An ambassador in an official meeting, minutes were taken. He sends this cipher, which I see, this coded message, which I see, and then suddenly our allies and 20 of our members of my party start jump ship. So all we want is an inquiry into this, because we feel there is blatant evidence of regime change.
The State Department have denied they push for regime change. If what you're saying is true, why would they have denied it?
Well, I think it'll be extremely embarrassing, the State Department clearly, or this Undersecretary, Donald Lu, clearly did not think this would become public.
Elections are scheduled for next year. If you are so confident of your re-election, why not just wait for those elections?
Mark, this is insulting for a country of 220 million people, that an elected Prime Minister is removed by this conspiracy. And we know what the conspiracy was. Let me just say, Pakistan is not the first country where the regime change by the US has taken place.
No Pakistani Prime Minister has ever finished a term in office. And I'm curious as to why that is and why the role of the military is so significant.
In the last 62 years, half the time we have been ruled by military and half the time by these two families. They've ruled us. So I'm the first time it's a new party has come up. And I feel that days of military ruling Pakistan are over. I think there's a consensus in the country that even a poor democratic government is better than a military government, because what happens is that when the military intervention takes place, we go back to square one. We then again have to start our evolution as a democracy.
At the moment, do you have any indication from foreign governments that they would support you returning to power?
Mark, I don't want any support from foreign governments to get into power. I want free and fair elections. Let the people of Pakistan decide whoever they think is best to govern the country.
Just looking now at the India-Pakistan relationship, a couple of weeks ago we had the Indian High Commissioner to Australia, Manpreet Vohra, on the show, and he said that Pakistan sponsored terrorism, and that they won't deal with Pakistan until Pakistan deals with that. I'm curious, do you have a response to that position?
Well, this is a standard line by India, because you see, where is the terror? There is only one issue between us, and that is Kashmir. And I find that it's just lack of leadership that we have not been able to resolve this issue. Because the advantages of peace in the subcontinent are enormous. Pakistan on one side has China, one of the biggest, fastest growing economy in the world. And then we have India on the other side, which is potentially one of the second biggest market in the world and economy in the world. And then on our other side, we have all the world energy reserves. We have Iran, and then we have Central Asia. So we are strategically placed. If we had peace with India, India then has access to all the energy corridors. It has access to Central Asia, land access. And on the other hand, Pakistan and India, we have access to each other's markets. So the dividends of peace are enormous. But unfortunately, it is all stuck in Kashmir. We have not been able to resolve this issue in 75 years. And in my opinion, it just takes determined leadership. If two can decide to sit down and resolve the issue, then this whole area will be transformed. And may I say that, the issue of resolving Kashmir lies with the people of Kashmir.
There's lots of Pakistani Australians watching tonight. Do you have a message for the diaspora?
The biggest support actually since this regime change in Pakistan took place, it's never happened before that all the Pakistanis, when we have almost 9 million Pakistanis diaspora living in different countries, and never has it happened that they turned out in such large numbers to support us, to support me. It's never happened, because normally when there's a regime change, there's celebration in Pakistan. People distribute sweets. This is the only time that people came out, and millions of people within the country and Pakistanis outside came out to protest. And so I consider finally that I consider the overseas Pakistanis living in Australia, they are one of our greatest assets.
Just lastly, before I let you go, you have had an incredible life. What would you most like to be remembered for?
Look, You know, Mark, I've also been very privileged. I've had more love and respect in my country than hardly any other Pakistani. So my contribution to my society would be just that I would, which I started my politics 26 years ago. And I have to say I was inspired by, when I first went to England as a teenager, the two things that inspired me about England: rule of law and a welfare state. And later on, when I studied my own history, the first welfare state in the history of mankind was made by our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the first state of Medina. This is exactly what he did. And these are exactly the principles which I set out 26 years ago. This is what I want in Pakistan. My biggest struggle, right, has been that the ruling elite, these two families that have ruled Pakistan for 30 years, they refuse to come under the rule of law. The prosperous states always have rule of law. And that is the reason why you liberate the potential of a society. So the big difference is rule of law. And that's really my mission.
Imran Khan, thank you so much for joining us on India Now.
Pleasure, Mark.
And that is all we have time for on the show tonight. Huge thank you to our guests Apurva Mahire and Neha Madok. Thank you both for being on the show.
Thank you, Mark.
Before we go, there's this dance routine from Paris-based Sri Lankan-born Usha J and friends that's been going nuts on the internet, and honestly, we just wanted to end the show with something fun. Enjoy. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Zone, 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 zone. Let me see your shoulders work. I mean, I don't know what y'all came here to do, but if you ain't got a lighter, what the f you smoking for?
What the f though? Where the love go? 5, 4, 3, 2, I let one go. Wow, get the f though. I don't bluff, bro. Aiming at your head like a buffalo.